Good afternoon, Daniel. Bob Perry. Hope you're feeling better. This will be a relatively short video, hopefully, uh, just to discuss the two wars that are really affecting the world, and yet our news media doesn't cover very much of it. But we'll just concentrate on the Ukraine and Israel. First of all, I just want to reinstate that we have been lied to for decades, but especially about these two countries. For one, Ukraine is portrayed as a democratic country with equal rights for its people, and Israel is also portrayed as a kind and loving, just country with equal rights for those that live within the country, although they have problems with their neighbors. We can look into the reasons for some of these um, deep-seated difficulties at a later date. But today I'm discussing the wars that are seeing on TV. They're going to be terminated, hopefully soon, perhaps with the defeat of both entities, both countries. We should be aware of these possibilities and open minded to why all this is happening, and to realize that we've been there again lied about the causes and the effects of what's going on in these wars. And we can discuss that at a later date. But we must face the facts of reality, what's really happening. We have to be aware of the changes that are taking place and believe it is good for the better life, for our better life, and better life for us all, although at times it's difficult and horrific. Well, let's look at the Ukraine as an example. It was set up by the United States. It was an independent country. We interfered with it and had a premier replaced that was pro-Ukrainian, and they replaced him with a comedian, Zelensky. And we begin to pump billions and billions of dollars into the Ukraine with no questions asked, except for one question. Joe Biden stepped in and he demanded that the Ukrainian auditor, who had been working on the bribery within the country, and Joe had him fired, or there'd be no $1 billion deal that was in the process. And that's kind of where it started going off the track, or maybe even before, because there were videos of John McCain and Lindsey Graham boasting to the Ukrainian Nazi battalions that we'll give you the military aid and money and go into Russia and throw out Putin, and we'll set up another government. And the U.S. then would push NATO into supporting the Ukraine, pushing them to invade Russia. But Russia struck first. Bear in mind that those Nazi battalions had been to Russia before. Nazi battalions in the Second World War who brutalized the Russian people and the Ukrainian people as well, which was part of Russia. It was in the boundary of Russia. And to have the Nazis coming back. And but the war started, and it could have been ended in 2 months. For after the war had first started, the Russian and the Ukrainians signed an agreement in Istanbul, and that the Ukraine would remain intact with some elimination of the Nazis within their military and the like. But before the ink was dry on this proposed peace agreement between Russia and the Ukraine, Boris Johnson from the UK, United Kingdom, came in along with John Brennan from the CIA, and then said so many words, Ukraine will not stop fighting. They will fight. They must fight to the last Ukrainian soldier, and we will support you, and we have your back. Well, they're getting down to the last Ukrainian soldiers, and with the loss of an estimated over 700,000 soldiers were killed. Well, the Russians have taken many casualties as well, anywhere between 50 and 70,000. So it's a brutal war, and it could have been stopped a long time ago. Now we'll move over to, and the end is coming in the Ukraine. And we'll go over to Israel. And Joe Biden said a long time ago as a senator, if there was no Israel, if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to invent it. Well, we didn't invent Israel, but we've been supplying all the money and the military capabilities to sustain Israel. And we're giving them all the weapons to slaughter millions of Palestinians and other neighbors as well. And we Americans have been brainwashed for decades, thinking that the neighbors of Israel have been just killing the Israelis, when the ratio of deaths between their neighbors and the Israelis is about 8-1, and so we have to take off our rose-colored glasses and start looking what is really happening. And for years we've been brainwashed. I hate to go back and brainwashed and lied to for decades. As I said, we believed that Israel was a good neighbor, kind, respectful to its neighbors, and in reality, they stole land from their neighbors and turned it over for new Jewish settlements. Israel, in the last years, was forced to separate a landmass, and they gave it. They allowed the Palestinians to come into this area, the Gaza Strip, which was 8 miles long, 20 miles wide. 8 miles wide, 20 miles long, and it basically was a large concentration camp with barbed wire, high fences, and guard towers controlling who would go in, who would go out, what would go in, and what would go out. And it was completely controlled by the Israelis. And it was a concentration camp, basically. And when I was talking to a friend of mine not too long ago, and they said, well, what happened on October 7th? I said, well, where did this Hamas come from on October 7th? Well, they came from that concentration camp. And that concentration camp has 20 million people in it. And the Hamas broke out of that concentration camp to take the fight to Israel for their freedom. And they took prisoners back. And Israel went ballistic, or pretended to go, by lying what really happened and vowed to take action. The action, they had the plans already hatched up to drive or exterminate over 2 million people in Gaza. Either run them out of the country or kill them. And they started by bombing an unarmed civilian population. Israel was very proud of their bloodthirsty military. Killing Arabs would be easy. They've been doing it for 75 years. And they decided, well, we'll kill off all the leaders. But that doesn't work. When the Second World War, Franklin Delano Roosevelt died towards the end of the war, and Harry Truman came in, completely ignorant of what was basically happening, and he finished the job quite remarkably. When Al Capone was arrested and put away forever, his underground organization became bigger and tougher. And it lasted a long time without Al Capone. And part of Israel's plan was that they would reoccupy Gaza after they ridded the Palestinians, and then onto Lebanon to take more land from them. And of course, eliminate the pesky Hezbollah in northern Lebanon. Now, the Hezbollah is a separate organization, but they were formed military organization to run Israel out of Lebanon after being there for 20 years. It was the Hezbollah was formed and finally pushed out the Israelis and ended their 20-year occupation of Lebanon. And so they have standing in Lebanon. But after Lebanon would be conquered, as Israel wanted or expects to do, and they're bombing the hell out of Lebanon, like just unbelievably. Then when they finish with Lebanon, their goal is to go on to Syria and finish them off. Now they've been fighting with Syria, the same thing. The Golan Heights was part of Syria. It's legally still part of Syria, but occupied by the Israelis. And when they finish off with, their goal is to finish off with Syria and then perhaps go on to Iraq to settle those few feuds they have with them. If you remember the Scud mussels during the Gulf War coming from Iraq. And then ending up in their grand finale, their plan is to attack and destroy Iran. That's a pretty big country, but they'll need help. So their goal is to draw the United States in for the grand finale and destroy Iran. And it's all that's, and there again, take over the oil fields. That basically, that was their plan. Now, I don't know this for sure, but from what I've read and what I've heard and seen, it's logical that was their plan, and they have no fear about doing it up until recently. So the grand Israeli military with its F-35 tanks, their powerful, the F-35 jets and their powerful tanks, and small but powerful army. And they have the Iron Dome and other defense systems that would protect them from the outside world. Now, the opponents they were facing, Hezbollah, or Hamas, I'm sure I meant to say, is nothing to them, to the Israelis, nothing to fear. They're just a bunch of rebels dressed in rags, a few guns, maybe rockets or so, but no air force, no tanks, nothing they can do against the Israeli F-35s and their tanks and their elite infantry. And so no problem with the taking care of the Hezbollah in the northern Iran. Lebanon, the rest of Lebanon has a small army. They won't fight, no problem. As far as Syria is concerned, no big deal. The IRS, the Israelis have already bombed Syria constantly. I mean, they're bombing it quite often, and they don't fear Syria at all, except for the Russians that in there is supporting the government of Syria. But still no problem. And then the grand finale is, as I said, is Iran. Now they're sneaky people, although they've invented the game of chess. But they don't have any military to really speak of. They have these rockets, little toys, but they're more bluffs than anything else. And the Israelis often say that it's all show, nothing there, all puff and no smoke. And so Israel will show them with the U.S. Backing. They'll take care of them. And then once they finish with Iran, no one will touch them. Summing it up, the Jewish state right now, up until a week ago, was satisfied. They were fighting low IQ people, dressed in rags, the Arabs. The Arabs have a history of riding camels and chasing sheep. And up until this time, the Israelis could, with their tanks and their aircraft were dominant. Well, things have changed in those Arabs, or the ragheads, as the Israelis would call them. Some time ago, they stopped chasing sheep and now successfully pumping oil. For that oil, they've gotten a lot of money. They bought some weapons and developed weapons. And they've learned the art of war. Those F-35 jets fly high above and fast and carry bombs. And the tanks can roll over the countryside. Very powerful above the ground. These Arabs have been digging underground. And they don't have tanks of any magnitude or airplanes, as that matter of fact. But what they do have is sophisticated rockets that are supersonic. And they can fire those 1,400 miles. And these rockets go something like up to 6,000 miles an hour. So you can't even track them or radar. And they can't be stopped. These are the enemies of that Israel is facing now. The most sophisticated fighters in the world. They have weapons that can fire, and they can put a rocket through a window at 1,400 miles distance. And they're going to be using them. We're now witnessing one of the major wars of mankind. The outcome may result in mass changes, perhaps for good. If you remember, the change that we're probably looking at is like back in the Dark Ages when they built castles, and they were good and up until against arrows and bows and stuff like that, until they developed cannons and eliminated cannons. Well, now you have supersonic rockets that eliminate. There is no defense against them as at this present time. So we'll see this monumental change, and we should be aware of it. We must not fall for all the lies. And remember, the truth will set us free. Free people are happy people, because freedom gives us the ability to make our own decisions. I believe we're moving in the right directions. With the help of the internet, alternate news source, we can get the truth. We have to search for it a little bit more instead of turning on the 6 o'clock news. We have to search for it, but it's there, and by many wonderful and insightful and honest people. We have to decipher which ones are honest and the like, but we have freedom of choice to do that. And we'll end up with a truthful and open society, which will be good to see. Perhaps happy days are ahead of us. And as Paul Harvey would say, have a good day, because good days are coming after the storm.